our app is currently showing a list with all the projects which we can delete, and now it's time to add a form so that we can add new projects instead of using those hard-coded projects all the time. So it's gonna look like this. This container is called a rounded panel. It has a header, and then it has different rows with labels and input fields, and then it has a big button. This is all displayed. It all looks native to what the design guidelines are for this particular platform. So let's begin by going to setting.html, and we'll add a container which is going to be our round panel. Inside of that round panel, we want to have our header, which says new project. See how it's a data type panel header, and what goes below is all inside the label control container. That's what it's called. We're gonna start by creating a row. That's how you group your input fields with their labels. It's a data type row, and then it's a data type label, and then an input field which we're calling project name. And we're going to have a second row with that second input field called client name. That's where we type the name of our client. And the button, for the button, instead of using a button tag or an input tag, we are using a div, which is of data type button, and it's gonna stretch horizontally. And when it's clicked, we are gonna call a function called create project, which lives in our main object ztempo, the name of our app. Let's go to ztempo.js and get started with that create project method. First thing that we want to have is a checkup, so that both fields we're going to make both fields required. So we want to have an error message shown to the user if any of the two fields are empty. That's very straightforward. We'll just use an if statement. We get we get both input fields by their IDs, and we read their values. If the value of any of them equals the empty string, then we just show an alert saying please complete the required fields, and nothing else is going to happen. If they enter something on those fields, what we want to do is to push a new project object into this array. That project is going to have the name and client that the user entered, and a new ID which is going to be unique. That new ID is going to be equal to the greatest of all IDs plus 1. So in this case it's going to be 4. If this was, say, ID 20, this one ID 100, ID 200, the new ID would be 201. Let me show you how I'm doing that. I'm just pushing a new element to the list, to the array. It has the name that the user entered, the client's name, and for the ID I created a method called getNextProjectID, which is very simple. All it does, it iterates through the project's list and grabs the largest ID. It stores it as current ID, so it'll iterate through the entire project list, and when it finds the greatest one, every time it finds one that's bigger than the rest, it'll store that one and add 1, and that's what it's going to return at the end. So in this case it's going to be 3. And let me just show you what we have so far. It's not completed yet. If I don't add anything, I just click add, I get an error message. In your device this would be like a proper native alert box, and this is going to be a cool app, and you are the client. if I add this, it's not showing anything because there's something we're missing. If I go to a different page and then come back, it'll show because it'll reload all the projects. But what I need to do in order to show it right away is to somehow update this list. And I'm gonna do that in a very easy way. I'm just gonna basically reload the page and just like push it again so that the event is triggered, the initialization event is triggered again. So that's just very simple. I'm just pushing on the same page. Let me reload and show you. And if I add great app and you without the, yeah, there we go. And if I go to a different page and go back, they're being shown because they were added to our global object, to our main object. Summary of the tutorial. We are adding a form using a round panel which contains a header and then a label control container, rows with labels and input fields, a stretched button that doesn't go inside any row. If that button is clicked, we call create project. Inside of create project, we check for the values of both fields. If any of them is empty, we get an error message. Otherwise, we create a new project. We're pushing that to the list of projects. The ID of that new project is going to be equal to the greatest ID plus 1, so that we make sure it's unique. Otherwise, we can't select it or delete it or anything. And in order to update the view, we just push the screen again, and that will show you an updated version of the image list.